Nancy Drew Mystery Stories The Secret of the Old Clock, Chapter 7. The Angry Dog. With the instinct of a detective who dared not miss a clue, Nancy deliberately moved closer to the bench on which the Topham girls were seated. If there should be another will, I'm afraid we'll be out of luck. The words in Ada's nasal voice came clearly to Nancy. Isabel's reply was in so low a tone that the young sleuth could just manage to catch the words. Well, I, for one, don't believe Josiah Crowley ever made a later will. She gave a low laugh. Mother watched him like a hawk. Or thought she did, Isabel retorted. The old man got out of her clutches several times, don't forget. Yes, and what's worse, I'm sure Nancy Drew thinks he made a later will. That's why she's taken such an interest in those Uber girls. I actually saw them go into Mr. Drew's office yesterday, and it wasn't to deliver eggs. If Nancy gets her father interested, he might dig up another will. Oh, how I hate that interfering girl. At this, Nancy could barely refrain from laughing, so the Tophams were concerned about the existence of a second will. With bated breath, she listened further. You're such a worrywart, Ada. You can trust Dad and Mother to take care of things. No matter what happens, Isabel commented dryly, they won't let that pile of money get away from us. It's ours by right, anyway. You've got something there, Ada conceded. We should have owed Josiah's money after supporting and putting up with him for 3 years. That was pretty clever of Mother, never accepted any board money from Josiah Crowley. The conversation ended as Isabel and Ada arose from the bench and walked away. Nancy waited until they were out of sight, then emerged from her hiding place. Seating herself on the bench vacated by the Topham sisters, Nancy mulled over the remarks she had just overheard. There's no doubt in my mind now that if there is a later will, the Tophams haven't destroyed it. How thrilling, but where can it be? Nancy realized that to find it was a real challenge, and I'd better hurry up before the Tophams stumble on it. For another 10 minutes, Nancy sat lost in thought, sifting all the facts she had gleaned so far. There must be some clue I've overlooked, she told herself. Suddenly, with a cry of delight, she sprang to her feet. Why didn't I think of that before? The Hoover girls and the Turners aren't the only ones who should have figured in this will. There are other relatives of Mr. Crowley who have filed a claim. I wonder who they are. If I could only talk with them, I might pick up a clue. Immediately, Nancy set off for her father's office. He was engaged in an important conference when she arrived, and she had to wait 10 minutes before being admitted to the inter-office. Now what? Mr. Drew asked, smiling as she burst in upon him. Have you solved the mystery, or is your purse in need of a little change? Nancy's cheeks were flushed and her eyes danced with excitement. Don't tease me, she protested. I need some information. At your service, Nancy. The young sleuth poured out the story of the Topham sisters' conversation in the park and told them of her own conclusions. Mr. Drew listened with interest until she had finished. Excellent deducting, he praised his daughter. I'm afraid that, though I can help you obtain the relatives' names, I don't know any of them. Nancy looked disappointed. Oh dear, she sighed, and I'm so anxious to find out right away. If I delay even a single day, the Tophams may locate that other will and destroy it. The next instant, her face brightened. I know. I'll drive out and see the Turner sisters. They might be able to tell me who the other relatives are. Nancy rose and headed for the door. Just a minute, said the lawyer. I wonder if you realize just what you're getting into, Nancy. What do you mean? Only this. Detective work isn't always the safest occupation in which to engage. I happen to know that Richard Topham is an unpleasant man when crossed. If you do find out anything which may frustrate him, the entire Topham family could make things extremely difficult for you. I'm not afraid of them, Dad. Good, Mr. Drew explained. I was hoping you would say that. I'm glad you have the courage of your convictions, but I didn't want you to march off into battle without a knowledge of what you might be up against. Battle? Yes, the Toplins won't give up the fortune without a better struggle. However, if they attempt to make serious trouble, I promise to deal with them myself. And if I do find the will, I'll take the matter into court. Oh, thank you. There's no one like you in all the world. After leaving her father's office, Nancy went directly to get her car. When she told Anna Gruen her plans, the housekeeper warned, "Don't become too deeply involved in this matter, dear. In your zeal to help other people, you may forget to be on your guard." "I promise to be as careful as a pussycat walking up a slippery roof," Nancy assured the housekeeper with a grin, and left the house. Quickly backing her car from the garage, she set off in the direction of the Turner home. The miles seemed to melt away as Nancy's thought raced from one idea to another. Before the young sleuth knew it, she had reached the house. "Hi, Judy," she called to the little girl who was playing in the yard with a mini badminton set. The child looked very cunning in a pink play suit. The embroidered teddy bears on it were surely the work of her loving hands. "Hi, Nancy. I'm glad you came. Now I have somebody to play with," Judy said, running up to the visitor. Obligingly, Nancy took a racket and battled the feathered shuttlecock toward the child. "Hit the birdie," she called. Judy missed but picked up the shuttlecock and whammed it nicely across the net. Nancy hit it back, and this time the little girl caught the birdie on her racket and sent it over. The game went on for several minutes, with Judy crying out delight. "You're the bestest batter I've ever played with, Nancy," she declared. After 10 minutes of play, Nancy said, "Let's go into the house now, Judy. I want to talk to your aunties." Judy skipped ahead and announced her new playmate's arrival. "Hello, Nancy," the woman said as she entered the living room. "We were watching the game from the window," said Mrs. Mary Turner. "This is a real thrill for Judy. Edna and I are very poor at hitting the birdie." "It was lots of fun," Nancy replied. "I'm glad to see you all again." She now asked whether the police had located the thieves who had taken the silver heirlooms from the house. "Not yet," Mary answered, "and what's worse, we found that several other pieces have been taken too." "What a shame," Nancy explained, "but I'm sure the stolen articles will be found." When she added, "I came here on a particular mission." "Yes?" "Your story about Mr. Josiah Crawley intrigued me. Then the other day I met two girls, Grace and Allison Hoover, who told me of similar promise from him regarding his will." "How amazing," Edna Turner exclaimed. "I heard Josiah mention the Hoovers and Allison's beautiful voice." "Dad and I have become very much interested in the case, and are inclined to agree with the Hoovers that Mr. Crowley may have written another will shortly before his death and hidden it someplace." "Oh, wouldn't it be wonderful if such a will could be found?" Mary exclaimed. "It might mean all the difference in the world to Judy's future." "What I want to do," Nancy went on, "is talk to as many of Mr. Crowley's relatives as I can find. Some place I may pick up a clue to where a more recent will is hidden. Tell me, do any of his other relatives live around here?" "Yes, 3 that I can think of," Edna answered. She went on to say that 2 cousins who had never married lived on a farm just outside Tudesville. Their names are Fred and William Matthews. Suddenly the Turner sisters blushed a deep pink. They glanced at each other, then back at Nancy. Finally Edna said, "Many years ago Fred proposed to Mary, and William to me, and we came near accepting. But just at that time we had the great tragedy in the family that took Judy's mother to bear, so we decided not to marry." An embarrassing pause was broken by Judy. "Someday my aunties are going to give me one of my mother's dollies, Nancy. Isn't that nice?" "It certainly is," Nancy agreed, "and you must be sure to show it to me." Then she asked the sisters, what relation are the Matthews to Mr. Crowley?" "First cousins on his mother's side." "Do you think they would mind my asking them some questions, even though I'm a stranger?" Not at all, Mary replied. They're very fine gentlemen. And tell them Mary and I sent you, Edna added. How far is Tunnisville from here? Nancy inquired. Oh, not more than 5 miles on Route 10. Route 10A. You must drive there. You could drive there in a few minutes. It's on the way to Masonville. Nancy, won't you stay and have lunch with us? Eager to continue her work, the young sleuth was about to refuse, but Judy put in an invitation also. Please, oh please, Nancy. And while my aunties are fixing it, you and I can play badminton. All right, Nancy agreed, and thank you very much. It was nearly 2 o'clock when she finally was ready to depart. Oh, Mary, said Edna suddenly, we forgot to tell Nancy about Josiah's wife's cousin, Mrs. Abby Rowland. She'd be apt to know more about the will than anyone else. That's right. You really should call on her, Nancy. She took care of Josiah one time when he was sick, and he thought the world of her. He often declared he intended to leave her something. She's a widow and has very little. Even a few $1,000s would mean a lot to her, Edna added. Abby must be over 80 years of age and growing forgetful. She has no children, and there's no one to look after her. Where shall I find Mrs. Rowland? Nancy asked, hoping it was not far away. Abby lives on the West Lake Road, Edna responded. It's a good many miles from here. Then I shan't have time to go there today, the young sleuth said, but I'll surely see her as soon as I can. And now I must be going. Nancy thanked the Turner sisters and said goodbye, but before she could leave, Judy insisted upon showing how she could jump rope and do all kinds of dancing steps with a hoop on the lawn. Judy entertains us all the time, Mary remarked. We believe she's very talented. Nancy thought so too. As she drove off, she again hoped that money would become available for a very special education for Judy. And after Nancy had gone 5 miles along the designated route, she began to watch the mailboxes. Soon she noticed one which bore the name Matthews. The farmhouse stood back a distance from the road and had a wide sweep of lawn in front of it. Near the house, a man was riding a small tractor, mowing the grass. Nancy drove down the narrow lane which led into the grounds and stopped opposite the spot where the man was working. The man's back was toward her, and he apparently had not heard the car above the noise of the tractor, so she waited. Looking toward the house, Nancy suddenly saw a sight that appalled her, which between 2 stones of a broken wall was a police dog puppy whining pitifully. Nancy dashed forward and released the little animal. As it continued to whimper, she cuddled the pup in her arms and began to examine its paws. Why, you poor thing, Nancy said, seeing a tear in the flesh of one hind leg. This must be taken care of right away. She decided to carry the puppy over to the man on the moor. As Nancy walked across the lane, she suddenly heard an angry growl near her. Looking back, she saw a huge police dog, evidently the pup's mother, bounding towards her. It's all right, Nancy called soothingly to the dog. I'm not going to take your baby away. She took 2 more strides, but got no farther when a fierce snarl, the dog leapt on Nancy, knocking her flat. Chapter 8. A Forgotten Secret. Nancy screamed for help, hoping to attract the farmer's attention. She expected momentarily to be bitten by the angry dog, but to her great relief, the animal did not harm her. The young sleuth's sudden fall had caused the puppy to fly from her arms. With a leap, its mother was at the pup's side. She grabbed her baby by the back of its neck and trotted towards the barn. Oh, that was a narrow escape. Nancy took a deep breath as she got to her feet, brushed herself off, and ruefully surveyed a tear in her sweater. By this time, the man on the tractor, having changed direction, saw the frasca and came running. He apologized for the dog's actions, but Nancy said quickly, "It was my fault. I should have set the puppy down. His mother probably thought I was trying to dog-nap her baby." Possibly. Nancy explained why she had picked up the little animal, and the farmer said he would look at the cut later. "I'm glad you weren't hurt," he added. "Thanks for being such a good scout about it. Do you come to see me or my brother? Oh my goodness, he asked. I'm Fred Matthews. Nancy gave her name and added that she was acquainted with the Turner sisters and others who had been told they would benefit under Josiah Crowley's will. My dad, the lawyer Carson Drew, and I are working on the case. We believe there may have been a later will than the one presented by Mr. Topat, and we'd like to find it. And you came to see if William and I could give you a clue? Fred's bright blue eyes sparkled boyishly. That's right, Mr. Matthews. Although, also, did Mr. Crowley ever tell you he was going to leave you some money? Indeed he did. At this moment, another man came from the house, and Fred introduced him as his brother William. Oh my goodness, reading is making me yawn. Both were tall, spare, and strong-muscled. Though their hair was gray, the men's faces were youthful and unwrinkled. Let's sit down under the tree here and discuss this, Red suggested, leading away to a group of rustic chairs. He told William at Nancy's request and asked him, Did Cousin Josiah ever give you any idea he made a will in which we were not beneficiaries? No, I thought one would come to light when he died. To tell the truth, Miss Drew, Fred and I were thunderstruck at the will which left everything to the Tophams. That wasn't what Cousin Josiah led us to believe. It certainly wasn't, Fred spoke up, but I guess William and I counted our chickens before they were hatched. We just about make ends meet here with our small fruit farm. Help and equipment cost such a lot. One thing we've always wanted to do, but couldn't afford, was to travel. We thought we used the money from Cousin Josiah to do that. But our dream bubble burst, said William. No trips for us. Nancy smiled. Don't give up hope yet. Dad and I haven't. She was disappointed. Oh my goodness. She was disappointed that the brothers could offer her no clues about a place to look for another will. A little while later, she left the farm and returned home. No more evidence, she told her father. Let's hope Mrs. Abby Rowan has some. Early the next morning, she set off for the elderly woman's home and reached her destination by asking directions of people living along Westlake Road. This must be Abby Rowan's house, Nancy told herself. It fits the description. She climbed out of her car and stood before the one-story frame building which was badly in need of paint and repair. The yard around it was overgrown with weeds, and the picket fence enclosing the cottage sagged dejectedly. The place looked deserted, Nancy mused, but I'll see if Mrs. Rowland is at home. Nancy made her way up the scraggly path to the house and rapped on the front door. There was no response. After a moment, she knocked again. This time, a muffled voice called, Who's there? If you're a peddler, I don't want anything. I'm not selling anything, Nancy called out reassuringly. Won't you let me in, please? There was a long silence. Then the quavering voice replied, I can't open a door. I've hurt myself and can't walk. Nancy hesitated an instant before pushing open the door. As she stepped into the dreary living room, she saw a frail figure on the couch. Abby Rowland lay huddled under an old shawl with her weathered face drawn with pain. I'm Nancy Drew, and I've come to help you, Miss Rowan. The old lady turned her head and regarded Nancy with a stare of wonder. You've come to help me? She repeated unbelievingly. I didn't think anyone would ever bother about old Abby again. Here, let me arrange the pillows for you. Gently, Nancy moved the whole woman into a more comfortable position. Yesterday, I fell down the cellar stairs, Miss Rowan explained. I hurt my hip and sprained my ankle. Haven't you had a doctor? Nancy asked in astonishment. No, Abby Rowan sighed. Not a soul has been here, and I couldn't get in touch with anybody. I have no telephone. Can you walk at all, Nancy asked. A little. Then your hip isn't broken, Nancy said in relief. Let me see your ankle. Oh my, it is swollen. I'll bandage it for you. There's a clean cloth in the closet in the kitchen, Abby told her. I haven't any regular bandage. You really should have a doctor, Nancy remarked. Let me drive you to one. I can't afford it, the old woman murmured. My pension check hasn't come, and it's too small anyway. Let me pay for the doctor, Nancy offered. Abby Rowan shook her head stubbornly. I'll not take charity. I'd rather die first. Well, if you insist on not having a doctor, I'm going to the nearest drugstore to get some bandaging, and a few other things, Nancy told her. Before I go, I'll make you a cup of tea. There's no tea in the house, then I'll get a box. What else do you need? I need most everything, but I can't afford anything right now. You might get me some tea and a loaf of bread. That's enough. You'll find the money in a jar in the cupboard. It's not very much, but it's all I have. I'll be back in a few minutes, Nancy promised. She stopped in the kitchen long enough to examine the cupboards. With the exception of a little flour and sugar and a can of soup, there appeared to be nothing in the house to eat. Nancy found that the money jar contained less than $5. I'll not take any of it, she decided. Quietly, the young sleuth slipped out the back door. She drove quickly to the nearest store and ordered a stock of groceries. Then she stopped at a drugstore and purchased bandages and liniment. Reaching the cottage, she carried the supplies inside and adeptly set about making Abby Rowan more comfortable. She made a swollen ankle and bound it neatly with antiseptic bandage. It feels better already, Miss Rowan told her gratefully. I don't know what would have happened to me if you hadn't come. Oh, someone would have dropped in, said Nancy cheerfully. She went to the kitchen and in a short while prepared tea and a late lunch for the elderly woman. As Abby Rowan ate the nourishing meal, Nancy was gratified to observe that almost immediately her patient became more cheerful and seemed to gain strength. She sat up on the couch and appeared eager to talk with Nancy. There aren't many folks willing to come in and help an old lady. If Josiah Crowley had lived, things would have been different, she declared. I could have paid someone to look after me. It's strange that he didn't provide for you in his will, Nancy replied quietly. She did not wish to excite the woman by telling her real mission, yet Nancy hoped that she might lead her tactfully into a discussion of Josiah Crowley's affairs without raising hopes which might never be realized. It's my opinion that Josiah did provide for me, Mrs. Rowan returned empathetically. Many a time he said to me, Abby, you'll never need to worry. When I'm gone, you'll be well taken care of by my will. And then everything was left to the Tuppens. Nancy encouraged her to proceed. That was according to the first will, Abby Rowland stated. You mean there was another will? Nancy inquired eagerly. Of course. Why, I saw that will with my own eyes. You saw it? Nancy gasped. The old woman nodded gravely. Mine, I didn't see what was in the will. One day Josiah came to call and give me some money. Right off I noticed he had a bunch of papers in his hand. Happy, he said, I've made a new will. I didn't bother with a lawyer. I wrote it myself. How long ago was that? Nancy asked quickly. Oh, I'm going to fall asleep. Let me see, Abby Rowan frowned thoughtfully. I can't remember the exact date. It was this past spring. Anyways, Josiah hinted that he's done well by me. But Josiah, I said, are you sure it's legal to write it yourself? Of course it is, he said. A lawyer told me it was all right, just so long as I wrote it myself and signed it. But I did have it witnessed. Do you know who witnessed the will? Nancy broke in. No, he didn't say. Have you any idea what became of the will? Nancy asked hopefully. Well, I remember Josiah saying something and putting it somewhere where nobody could get it unless they had legal authority. But I really don't know what became of it. Are you certain that was all Mr. Crowley said? Nancy inquired gently. She recalled the Turner saying that Abby had become unforgetful. The elderly woman shook her head and sighed. Many a night I've lain awake trying to think what else he would say about where he would put the will. I just can't recollect. Try to think, Nancy begged. I can't remember, Abby Rowland murmured hopefully. I've tried and tried. She leaned against the cushions and closed her eyes as though the effort had exhausted her. At that very moment, the clock on the mantel chimed 12. Abby's eyes fluttered open, and an odd expression passed over her face. For an instant, she stared straight before her, then slowly turned her head and fastened her eyes on the clock. And that's the end of chapter 8. See you later.